Welcome to my greenhouse. I'm Missy Singer DuMars, and I'm a farmer. So welcome to Crown Hill Farm, and we're here in my greenhouse. I thought it would be fun to invite you all into a little taste of nature this morning, since that is our topic. And thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Creative Mornings, for inviting me here. And I really appreciate each of you taking the time to show up this morning. I may wander a bit in this talk, but what I can promise you is that somehow all the thoughts relate, and it's my genuine hope to send you off to the rest of your day led by a little bit more curiosity to the natural world around you and to your relationship to it. Sound good? Give me a jazz hand. I like jazz hands, by the way. So as I mentioned, I'm a farmer. I'm out here on a beautiful historic farm in Eden, New York, just southwest of Buffalo, for those of you that are not local to this area. But I wasn't always a farmer, and honestly, I never even had a dream to be one. I grew up in the suburbs. Literally, my backyard was a golf course. I didn't grow up going camping. My summer camp was definitely a much more posh experience with all the creature comforts of home. And in my adult life, I lived in cities. My first career was a career in theater. So as you can imagine, I barely even saw sunlight. I was in the theater early in the morning before the sun rose. I was in a dark room all day. Maybe I snuck off at a lunch break to see a bit of sun, but mostly I left the theater after the sun set. So my relationship to nature, as you can imagine, from my theater career through many other paths to being a farmer now, has really changed. And I'm going to share more about that journey as we go along and some of the steps along the way. But what I will say is that one of the turning points for me in my relationship to nature, and more importantly, my relationship to food, came when I was living in Hawaii, going to massage school. And I'll tell you more of that story and how it shifted things for me in a little bit. So, one thing that I want to start off with is that we are nature, the nature of you, the nature of who you are. We're a living being. There's nature within us. So we're not separate from it. Like, just think about that for a second. You are nature as opposed to something outside of it or within it. And, a really great example, there's studies of the diversity of what they call the microbiome in your body, like in your gut. For example, the microscopic bacteria and fungi that live there that are actually necessary for all kinds of human body functions. And there's some studies that show that our internal microbiome is actually informed by the microbiome, the ecosystems on a microscopic level of the soil where you live and the soil where your food comes. So if you're eating food, say, from soil that doesn't have a lot of life in it, that will be reflected in your gut. And we need that diversity. So that's just one example how the nature around us is the nature within us. And what I've come to is that nature for me is the ultimate teacher and guide. And for this talk, nature is a she, her, so that's her pronouns for my talk. So she is very similar to me as breath. And so through my years of studying breath work and healing modalities and energy work, I found that breath is actually really incredible because it's an automatic function, but we can take control of it. I'm going to take a breath for a minute. And what I love about breath is that it's both an indicator and a tool. And nature is the same way. So breath can tell us about our state of being, and then we can use breath to change our state of being. And nature is really similar. Like, we can look at what's going on in nature, and it can tell us what's going on around us, and we can work with nature to change our environment, change our state, and work with nature to feed our bodies and change our state within. So all this together, here we are at Creative Mornings, and I've been thinking about nature and creativity for a number of weeks now as I walk the farm and as I walk in the woods on my land. And like, what is it about nature and creativity? They seem like two different ideas that don't connect. And, you know, I've been thinking, how the heck am I going to weave this together? And what I really realized is that nature is inherently creative. Let's think about that. Nature creates all life. Nature has actually built into her blueprints the ability to create new life over and over and over. It's just born in how nature works. You know, look at a single seed. It has all the DNA to create a new life, to create more food, and then to create a seed to create life again the next season. It's kind of amazing. I can just stare at a seed and marvel at that fact alone. But not only that, nature is a creative problem solver. And in fact, the more challenge she's faced with, the more creative she gets. So let's think about that for a second. Think about perhaps ivy growing up a brick wall on a building where nature shouldn't be because there's brick, or that time you're taking a walk and you notice a tiny little plant pushing up through a crack in the concrete sidewalk. Like, those are such lessons for us, particularly in a challenging time like right now, that it takes the creativity to be alive, to reach for the light, to push through the hard concrete, the hard challenges in order to live and thrive. And we all have that within us. We all have that creativity within us. And in fact, I believe that that's part of why creativity is not a luxury. Creativity is a necessity to live, to thrive, to grow. You know, a really great example of this, besides being a farmer, I'm a really avid cook. Anyone who knows me has probably eaten something I've cooked. And when I lived in San Francisco a number of years ago, I would go to a lot of parties and potlucks, and maybe you can relate. And you'd find out that people have allergies, and it's like, what am I going to bring to this potluck? You end up cutting up some fruit or throwing together a salad because you don't know what else to bring. And I had many times of, you know, this person's gluten-free, and this person can only eat tree nuts, and this person can't eat tree nuts, and this person does eat sugar, and this person doesn't. And like, what do you cook? And for me, that kind of challenge, that sense of perceived limitation, pushes creativity. I had to get even more creative on how can I cook something that's delicious and beautiful and nourishing to everybody, and nobody needs to have fear about what they're eating or worry. So I've always found that limitations or challenges actually invite a deeper creativity, and that goes for nature as well as, you know, business, as well as all of life. And I think right now many of us are experiencing so many different forms of that creativity, and if you think hard enough, you might be aware of some spot in your life where some limitations and challenges have forced some creativity. One of the biggest lessons that I feel like nature has to teach, and that I've learned even more deeply as a farmer these past years, is a deeper understanding of the relationships and the interdependence of absolutely everything. Now, I never grew a thing. Like I mentioned before, I grew up on golf courses. I think the only houseplants we had as a kid were some cactuses in the front window. And even the few houseplants I tried to grow at various times in my life, I usually killed. And honestly, to this day, even though I'm a farmer, I kill every houseplant. I have one friend who used to give me houseplants, and I finally said, don't give me houseplants, I'll kill them. If they're not out in the field, I don't know how to take care of them. But, you know, the awareness of relationships is, it's why I choose to be a farmer, and it's what being a farmer has taught me more awareness too. So it's at both ends, just like I talked about, nature is both a teacher and a tool. You know, I very intentionally choose how I grow the food that I do on my farm because I'm aware of the relationships. I'm aware of the relationships of the microbes in the soil and how they help my plants grow. I'm aware of the relationships of, I'm always looking at different plants and how they grow well or don't grow well together. Like radishes grow well with everything. You want to plant potatoes after corn. There's zillions and zillions of little details like that that are speaking to the interrelationships of all the plants. I'm always aware of the weather, the sun shining, when it's going to rain, the temperature dropping. I can be out in the field and hear the wind whistle a different way and know I've got, you know, half an hour before I need to get inside. it's a different sense of relationship that nature can really teach you. And you know, when I decided to live in Hawaii, one of the things I was most excited about was to be barefoot as much as possible. Like, that was the thing. Forget that I was going to massage school, forget that I needed to find a place to live and all these things. I was like, I want to walk around everywhere I can barefoot all the time. And it was like my body knew that it wanted to be in relationship with the dirt before I even knew how beneficial that could be, both in my spirit as well as in body. And Hawaii, when I was in massage school in Hawaii, it was the first time ever that I ate food from the land. And I'll never forget pulling a carrot out of the ground and rinsing off of the hose and biting into it and having the sense of aliveness, having the sense of, this is something that I cared for from a teeny tiny seed, and now it gets to nourish me. Like, I nourish it and it nourishes me. It's a feedback loop. You know, if you've ever seen the infinity symbol, it goes like this. They call it a lemniscate. I always call it lemon skating. But it's this feedback loop, right? And nature, our food, it's like the love and nourishing that we give feeds us, because we are nature, we are of nature. And I get that feedback a lot from people who eat my food. Like, I don't know what you do on your farm, but the food tastes better than anywhere else. It can taste the love and care you put into it. And I know that I feel like that in the choices that I make, not just for the food that I grow, but the food I eat from other people who raise and grow food. So I want to invite that awareness in. Now, I'm not a permaculture expert, but I learned one of the permaculture concepts. And let me just say, permaculture is a type of gardening practice that is really designed to work with and within nature. So it uses nature's principles in planned gardens. And honestly, as I study and learn more about permaculture, the principles can apply to all life, whether it's business, whether it's your creative art, whether it's family, relationships. And one of the principles of permaculture that has fascinated me the most is a concept called edge patterns. Edge patterns, or the edge effect, is where two different ecosystems come together and meet. So a really good example, maybe you can think of examples, but the one I like as an example is where the ocean meets the shore, right? You have ocean ecosystem and you have a land ecosystem. Another great example is where the forest ends and maybe an open field or meadow begins, and what's right at that edge. That's the edge effect. And what's interesting, when you study the edges of two different places, that's where all the diversity is. That's where productivity is. That's where energy from the natural world is captured and used. And there's new life that forms right in that edge, in that transition spot that doesn't exist anywhere else. And so what I think about the edges is, what are the edges in yourself? You know, for me, I look at the intersection or the edges of the diverse range of experiences I have. You know, when I was little, I thought I was going to be a ballet dancer, and I have a love of the arts. I have a degree and worked in theater for a very long time, in technical theater. I'm a business coach, and I grew up in family businesses. I was a massage therapist. I've done all kinds of healing, counseling. At one point, I thought I was going to be a rabbi. So I have a large, diverse range of experiences. And what I actually find now is that the farm is my edge. In fact, it is the place where everything comes together. You know, most people don't realize that in order to be a farmer, you have to be a plumber, an electrician, a veterinarian. I didn't realize this either. A fence builder, a gardener, you know, everything. A construction worker, a scientist, a biologist, a chemist. Who knew? So to me, it's like, being in touch with nature, working with it every day, has been the ultimate experience of bringing the edges together. And so that is a great place to look within yourself. Like, you are nature. You have the edge effect right within you. And where are those edges, and what can you create from those edges? What is inherently being created that you may not have even noticed? in those edges. That's there waiting for you to recognize it, to tap into that energy and that creative force. When I think about you are nature, it goes even deeper. It's like you are designed. There's nature, like we talk about you are nature, and there's the nature of you. What is your nature? Just like a seed, when I think about a seed for a plant, it has its DNA and it's designed to be that plant. That's its nature. And we have our DNA and we are designed to be us. What is our nature? Where do I want to go? This time that we're faced with right now, like I mentioned, is some of the hardest challenges yet. Be it a complete disruption in the patterns we're used to. But nature has this way to teach us both about how the patterns drive us and how we can drive the patterns. In other words, nature is creative. So one of the places I think about is a river. And when I lived in Colorado, before moving here a few years ago, I lived right next to a big river. And I used to sit by that river and watch it for ages daily and talk to it. And she taught me a lot of things. Apparently, a river has a she, her pronoun as well in my world. And what's interesting about the river, which is also nature, is that when you watch it and you watch how it cuts its path, sometimes a boulder's in the way and it overtakes and crashes over the boulder. And sometimes there's a boulder in the way and nature, the river, finds its way around. And we, as nature, as creative beings, have that capacity as well. We have the capacity to look at what's before us and choose how we want to go over or around or through it. And those choices are part of our creative directive. That's part of, where we can go. We have a decision point right now in this moment of disruption, this moment where many of us are pausing to look at, what can be different? What is different? What was that may not be? And it's an important decision point. It's, it's a really simple choice about how do you want to move forward? And so what I think about personally is how do I want to move forward with a deeper awareness to the relationship of all things. In business, I look at honoring the relationships of workers, of vendors, of partners, of myself, of my team, of the plants, of the product, of the living thing that is my business in and of itself, and being conscious and aware in those choices of how do I want to move forward? How do I want to move forward aware of the impact and the interrelatedness? On the farm, you can change one little thing and everything else changes. And it's like you solve one problem and 10 other appear. That's the power of our impact. We tweak one little thing in how we move through the world, and it's a ripple effect of all these other things that change. And so one of the things that I really deeply think about, and I want to invite you to get curious about today, is your impact. How do you want to move through the world going forward in relationship to the nature that you are, that you're a part of, and that is you? How do you want to be in relationship to others when you really slow down to be aware of the interconnectedness of all of us? How do you want to move through the world knowing that you are nature and you are a creative being? And really, as I finish up in these last few seconds, and we're going to go into a little mini groups, I want to leave you with the question of how do you choose to move through life with a different awareness to your own innate nature and that of all that you have the power, the gift in this life to impact. Thank you so much for having me and sharing these few minutes with me. I really appreciate being here. Thank you. Yeah.